Welcome to the Cybersecurity Summit panel about security orchestration, automation, and the workforce. This is Kristin Judge, and I am the founder and CEO of the Cybercrime Support Network. We are a nonprofit organization, public-private partnership, and we are here to serve individuals and small businesses who have been impacted by cybercrime and online fraud. We also have a booth, as do all these great companies you see represented here. I'm going to have each person introduce themselves for a minute, and then we'll get right into our questions. Joe, let's start with you.
Sure, absolutely. It's a pleasure to be here, and many thanks for having me on the panel. My name is Joseph Carson. I'm the Chief Security Scientist at Thycotic, and we focus around making sure that all privileged access, whether it being on-premise, in the cloud, in applications and databases, have the right controls and security in place to make sure we reduce the threats of privilege abuse and credential abuse. I'm based in Tallinn, Estonia, so it's a pleasure to be here and looking forward to a very interesting and exciting discussion.
Thank you. Greg?
Hey, good morning, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Greg Pepper, and I'm a security architect with Checkpoint. Been here a little over 14 years now across my 20+ years in IT. And though many of you probably know us as the inventors of the modern firewall, Checkpoint is one of the leading security providers across the industry, with advanced technologies in network security, cloud, mobile endpoint, and IoT, just to name a few areas of our specialization. I appreciate the opportunity to talk with you all today.
Thank you. Nathan?
Good morning, everyone. I'm Nathan Wenzler. I'm the Chief Security Strategist here at Tenable. We are the leaders in the risk-based vulnerability management market and the founders and creators of the Nessus vulnerability scanner. Very, very happy to be here today. This automation subject, of course, is very near and dear to all of us in the industry, but seeing where this has gone in the last several years, very happy to be here to be able to talk about this. So thank you.
And we're glad to have you. Thank you. Isaac?
Yep, good morning. Thanks for having me. Isaac Hannagan. I'm a sales engineer with ReliaQuest, really specializing in looking at how we enrich and enhance visibility, ultimately leading to security confidence and automation for response.
Great. Torsten?
Yeah, good morning. My name is Torsten Larson. I'm the Director of Solutions Consulting for Galvanize. Galvanize is a leading governance, risk, and compliance software platform, and looking forward to talking about this wonderful, wonderful topic today.
And Chris?
Hi, everyone. Chris Pittman. I run sales engineering in the central U.S. here at BlackBerry. Historically, we've done mobile device management, mobile application management, and the acquisition of Cylance, of course, endpoint security. I also teach digital forensics and network forensics at Eastern Michigan University. Happy to be among my peers here on the panel.
Yay, Eastern Michigan. All right. So let's start with the first question. I'm going to have Joe start with this one. What types of tasks can be automated by a Soar solution to free up the time spent on routine tasks by your security teams?
Absolutely, that's a great question. And one of the things that I do see, and I basically have experienced quite a lot of it in the past couple of years, because prior to, of course, the pandemic, I used to travel quite extensively. And a lot of the tasks in regards to the employees at Thycotic, as we travel and work remotely or move around different locations, a lot of the tasks that I see being automated, at least in our sector of privileged access management, is around privileged access workflows. So when we look at orchestration, really it's about making sure multiple solutions can be brought together and provide automated interaction and responses. And some of the things that I've seen, I was traveling to Belarus, and one of the kind of tasks was kind of automated and integrated into multiple solutions. We don't have offices. We don't have, basically employees working. And I was there basically on a business trip and accessing work information. And one of the things that was able to be done automatically is based on my location I was coming from, is that we were able to route that request into various different systems to verify that I was really the person coming from that location, checking my devices, checking my identity, checking my authentication, checking what applications I was accessing from, and really bringing all of those things together to provide a risk score and understanding about, am I really the person that I'm saying I am? And ultimately, because it was coming from a country which was potentially unknown to the company, that it ended up triggering an automated process and flow to actually get a colleague of mine to verify that it was actually really me coming and accessing that system. So really what it ended up having is making sure is people are accessing sensitive systems from new locations, or even, what's happening is people are accessing remotely today, that making sure that those really are who they are saying they are, making sure the authentication and the authorization is valid. And ultimately, that was really kind of a lot of those automated tasks is really bringing all those together in order to make sure that identities are authenticated and authorized correctly.
Thank you. And let's see what Greg wants to add there.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that we've seen is that the implementation of Soar technologies, like many, right, it's not the initial setup, it's the lifetime of the configuration. And with all of these technologies, we have to walk before we jog and then we run. So we really have to start with the low-hanging fruit. And for us, we look at what are the mundane tasks that operations are doing regularly. Taking blacklist information as an example and somehow pushing it into IDS or IPS. Right? This is a prime example of low-hanging fruit where through Soar detection of events, whether they're from SIM or native logging sources, can automate and orchestrate the parsing of blacklist IPs and automate the implementation of that, whether it's in the firewall, the routers, the IDS, right? There's many technologies that might consume that blacklisting type of information.
Great, thank you. Isaac, did you want to chime in here also?
Yeah, I think, it's really a confluence of kind of what we heard before. But really, as we look at capability to really automate, it's I think, what are you doing to better provide interconnectivity and unify what you're doing across multiple platforms with the goal of, enriching your initial response, but also being able to build out the competence that you have across those platforms, so you have that full contextualization that's going on with that enrichment, so you're actually able to make a more intelligent decision much further up in your incident response or just data pipeline.
Great, thank you. Torsten, I'm going to bring this question to you next. One impediment to the adoption of Soar products is that it requires a talented team to integrate it with whatever technology the organization has installed. How do you train your existing in-house expertise to effectively use those tools? So much comes back to workforce.
Yeah, I mean, it absolutely does, right? I mean, as security professionals, we have a whole entire catalog of tools that we use. And the good thing is I think security folks naturally want to learn and continue to learn new different types of software, different types of platforms, understand the integration and make them work at a level that's high enough to offer the support you need in an orchestrated environment. So, training the workforce, it's just like anything else. Got to get them interested, understand the outcomes and the positive reactions that will come from using a piece of software, and then motivate, to have everybody learn that software.
Good point. Greg, did you want to join in on this one with me?
I was just going to state that one of the big changes, especially with Soar, is right, the need to automate and orchestrate all these operations. And I think for SecOps, this has been a 180 for a lot of our coworkers, employees, partners, customers who didn't come from that code-centric world, that are not necessarily comfortable in Python or in APIs or using automation. And from a workforce enablement perspective, and Soar is one of technologies, but this kind of DevOps mentality crashing into SecOps is happening all over the place. And I think Soar is amplified because of the nature of the API integration and automated responses that we're trying to develop.
Thank you, Greg. Chris, did you want to add on?
Yeah, so I like what Greg just said about the collision between DevOps and SecOps. And I think when organizations who are already maybe strapped from a staffing, especially a security expertise standpoint, run into an issue about integrating different platforms with Soar, one of the things I always recommend is, involve those partners, involve the vendors who are bringing those technologies to you. Most of them will have some services that can help enable your team, even whether this is just some hand-holding at the beginning. If you're not interested in necessarily doing a full purchased services to help them do that job for you, I think if you have a true security partner, they will help your team understand how to use their products and make their products work with the rest of your stack. And honestly, if that partner isn't really ready to do that for you, you probably have the wrong partner.
Great, thank you. This question is going to go to Joe first. There are many security technologies already in place in most enterprises. How are existing technologies integrated into a Soar solution?
Absolutely, that's a great question. I think this is probably one of the most important aspects of our industry, is that we really, we can't live in the world of complex security anymore. We can't live in the world of silo solutions. That world is behind us, and we really need to move forward to making usable solutions. And we also need to make sure that the solutions work together. And this is what's really key here, in really making sure that the technologies that have in place, that they can actually be automated, integrated, and work together. And this is what's critical to making sure that we have a successful, more resilient security strategy in the future. And some examples of that, I mean, it's great to, we look across the board today, myself coming from privileged access management and working together, for example, with security orchestration into the likes of Tenable with Nathan, where we're able to do vulnerability analysis and share information back and forward, so we can actually communicate and provide much more value to the user. And at the same time, with the likes of with BlackBerry, with Cylance, with reputation feeds and reputation engines, that when we see something requesting for privileges, we can communicate and work together to determine whether it's safe for that application to execute, whether it's maybe something malicious like ransomware or something like a backdoor Trojan. Being able to work together and communicate is going to be the most effective thing we can do moving forward. And if we actually have the best example of security orchestration, it's even this example today of all of us from different vendors in the call, all working together in order to solve a major problem. And that's what security orchestration is about, and that's where the technologies can come together.
Great points. Nathan, would you like to chime in?
Yeah, I'd love to. I want to piggyback on one part Joe said there about the siloing that tends to happen with a lot of tools. And I think that we get caught up as practitioners, we get caught up a lot of times in the technology side of these things, right? It's really easy to look at a Soar platform and start talking about APIs and how do we integrate and data, moving from one point to another. And we lose sight of what we're really trying to accomplish with this, right? Which is a workflow and a business practice and process that we're trying to automate for the good of the entire business. And I think when you're looking at breaking down some of those silos, simplifying to some extent the security the security tools that are interacting, it's really, really important for teams to take a step back and start talking to the business, understand what needs to be accomplished, understand what the risk tolerances are and the risk management practices are for the whole organization. Just take a look at what they need done from a risk standpoint or what they're trying to protect, and have that kind of business focused view as part of your decision-making process, so that you can say, like, look, these silos over here, we don't need to even deal with because they don't really bring value to the conversation. These silos over here, we have to break those apart because the business needs, like to Joe's point, we need better credential management. That's way more key than something else. We've got to get that integrated into Soar. So remember the business side of this for all of you out there listening. The technology part can be hard, but you've got partners and resources to help you with that. But if you don't do that fundamental piece of understanding the business's needs and how they need to be protected, this whole thing is going to fail in the long run because you won't be aligned with what the business is trying to accomplish.
Thank you, Nathan. Greg?
Yeah, and I wanted to build on something that Nathan just said there, and I like to compare the layers 1 through 7 to the layers 8, 9, and 10, right? The people, the politics, and the money. Because regardless of the product and the project and the process, if you don't have alignment at layers 8, 9, and 10, it doesn't matter which best-of-breed technology you've deployed, right? As I like to joke, a poorly configured firewall makes a great router, or a poorly configured identity role makes for a great data breach, as an example. But the key is that interoperability, right? And interoperability for all of us is what makes us best of breed. And yes, we all want to secure your everything, but at the end of the day, we have to play nicely with others. And especially in the source space, right? I mean, SIEM has always been the primary source of connectivity and communication, right? All of our technologies dump our logs and alerts to the SIEM. But more and more, we're seeing Soar have native plugins to each of our technologies for maybe higher accuracy, quicker time to detection. And then ultimately, the remediation has to happen not back to the SIEM, but back to whatever management and APIs at each one of our technologies, whether it's network security, endpoint security, vulnerability and risk management, privilege identity access management, just to name a few, right? So I think the SIEM has always been the first point of Soar integration, but it has to then talk to my endpoint, my cloud, my server, my serverless, and any other network technologies you want to bring into the mix.
Thank you. I'm going to have this question start with Chris, and I think almost everybody else is going to join in. With a shift towards automation and machine learning, what impact does this have on the workforce? Chris, you start with that?
Sure thing. So I think number one, and I think we've talked about this a lot over this year, right? In almost every venue I've been involved in, is the additional expertise and education that comes with automation and machine learning. So there's a data science requirement there, right? Now, this is going to accompany in a lot of ways Python and what we're doing with our APIs. And what I've seen and what I continue to say is that this education is pretty easy to come by because there's a lot of very free or very inexpensive education that will provide your security teams exposure to how data science works and how data science impacts things like SOAR, but not just SOAR, integrations between the solutions that Greg was just talking about. So one is that there's a change in expertise that's needed. We're not just operations, we're not just engineering solutions anymore, but we need to understand what's going on from a statistics and a data science and a data measurement and an anomaly standpoint. And that impacts the workforce by shifting their mindset, but also shifting their educational requirements a little bit. And then also, though, it changes what they're working on a day-to-day basis, because maybe, right, if we can automate these things effectively with some AI, we can redeploy them to some more important, or what I like to say, more strategic tasks.
Thank you. Isaac, would you like to join in?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I think kind of dead on the money, right, is you ultimately have, a different barrier to entry as we start moving into automation and AI, or ML rather, because you're looking at an inherently different skill set. But once you can achieve that skill set, what you're actually doing is then leveraging platforms and scenarios that actually enable everybody else in the organization to accelerate everything else that goes on, right? So you kind of have that harder barrier to entry. What you're really doing is once you can achieve that, you're hitting that point of scalability that really we've struggled with since the beginning of time, especially as all of our landscapes continue to expand and grow, and we're trying to look at more with less or more with the same if we're lucky these days, right? And so really being able to make the most out of not only the compute resources and the intelligence that we're getting from our environments, but also then how do we get more out of really the human dynamic from our organizations as well.
Thank you. Torsten?
Yeah, I mean, again, to Isaac's point, it's doing more with less. Security professionals have traditionally always been overworked, and being able to offload some of those, I won't call them mundane tasks, but some of that minutia that you have out there that requires, constant feeding and stuff, being able to offload some of that and redeploy and refocus the efforts of the security professional into things that are much more important to the business rather than the day-to-day, going through and finding, vulnerabilities and threats and viruses and things like that. Being able to offload that, I think, is going to be a big boost to the workforce and allow them to, again, focus on things that really need attention.
Yeah, I don't think people should be worried about losing jobs, because I've never met a security professional who has a lot of extra time on their hands and doesn't need help with some of these rote tasks. Nathan, did you want to add anything?
Yeah, I mean, I think Chris really nailed it right out of the gate there about the repurposing, or maybe just getting back to the original purpose of what you're trying to accomplish with your security team, right? We've talked about this, I think, a number of times in some of the other panels in this series about, you're getting caught up in the day-to-day about managing things on Excel spreadsheets, which, everyone still uses Excel as their favorite security tool, right? But you hired really expensive pen testers to come in and do pen testing. You didn't hire them to come in and do Excel spreadsheet management. So it's not just even a repurposing that's a benefit to the business. It's also a benefit to the employee. I mean, that's what security practitioners want to do. They want to do the interesting work. They're going to be more motivated. They're going to be more effective if they do that. And I think long-term, when we talk about impact of these technologies to businesses, one of the changes I'm hoping that we're going to see is again, everyone's point, Isaac especially, the skill set that's needed for doing this kind of threat analysis and event analysis is a little bit different than, the traditional sort of system admin, security engineer kind of role. And as we have a massive job shortage, everyone's clamoring for security people. This is a really good area to start focusing on bringing in new skill sets into organizations. You need people who understand risk management concepts. You need people who understand data analytics. You need people who understand data science. These people may not come from an IT background. They could come from an auditing background. They come from a finance background. They can come from all kinds of places. And this is a really, really good opportunity for security as an industry to start to fill the ranks, to bring in those broader skill sets and leverage them appropriately, whether that's on your SOAR platform or elsewhere. But I think this is be interesting in the next few years to see if that's the impact that we get from these kinds of adoptions.
Thank you. Joe, anything else to add?
Sure, absolutely. I think for me, I always look at this is that we've been doing this our entire careers. Ever since I've been in the industry for 25, 30 years, we've been doing, automation has been what we do. You know, that in technologists, that's what basically our primary function has always been doing, whether it being automated a script, the deployment of a server, you know, doing a vulnerability scan. We've always been doing automation. What's different and what we're doing better at is being able to do integration and automation between interoperability between solutions. That's what's really kind of moving forward in becoming much more, I'd say, you know, business benefit. And I think it goes really back to, you know, both Chris's and Nathan's point as well, is that ultimately we have to look at this as a business enabler. No matter what it is it ultimately has to solve a problem for the business. It has to provide an ROI. It has to provide business value, because otherwise you're just doing it for the sake of technology. And ultimately those people internally have to be business focused, have to be business risk focused. I see that for this, you know, type of thing is how does it impact the workforce? I think it's really about getting a balance between what your internal skill sets should be and what service providers that you work with, because ultimately you're not going to need this for the, you know, it's not going to help your business on the long term. It helps you do efficiency and improvements and be able to get things operational much faster. But the question is, do you need all of those skills internally, or do you actually work together with an automation provider or some service provider to balance the in-house and external skills? So for me, I think it's about a key balance. This doesn't, you know, take away jobs. It actually creates jobs. This is a job creation focus. It just means that we have to change the skill sets and focus where those jobs are.
Thank you. Let's move over to Greg now with a different question. We know we're talking about this human, you know, how much do we need the humans here? Will organizations be nervous about giving SOAR tools the autonomy of detecting the security events without a human interaction?
You know, back to my walk, jog, run comment, I think when we start with the simple tasks of walk, organizations should not fear enabling automation and orchestration response. Now, as I like to say, we don't eat the whale in one bite, right? So we're not going to have every single playbook automate every single response scenario, especially those that require secondary level of, you know, analysis or some type of information security professional to review the content, as an example. But I think if you think about, you know, your bronze, silver, and gold, right, your basics, right, those are low-hanging fruit. If an administrator is doing a task multiple times throughout the day, it should be scripted, it should be automated, and we should easily be able to plug into a response. You know, things that potentially involve multiple groups or technologies coordinating together, maybe that's that second step where it goes into some type of content review. And right, and those last, you know, the hairiest scenarios, right, when my EDR is flashing big malware outbreak, or right, all of a sudden my IPS is lit up like a Christmas tree and there's multiple indicators of compromise that are firing. Right. Well, these are the third level, but we have to do the simple things first and show success and have quick wins to gain trust of the business and our IT organizations to take that next step forward.
Thank you. Nathan, would you want to finish this question up for us?
Yeah, thanks. I think the crawl, walk, run analogy, we all know it well. I mean, I think every implementation of the planet kind of goes that route. But you know, like any athlete, to get to do the run standpoint, there's a amount of training that has to happen before that. And this is the piece that I see for a lot of these kinds of implementations where businesses struggle and fail, and they create that fear that the machines are going to take over and, you know, automate themselves into oblivion because, you know, the platform is going to start doing things that no one expects it to do. The reason that happens is because they themselves don't know their own workflows. They don't know their own processes. They haven't invested the time up front to really understand their business. It's a simple thing to say, you know, let's look at some individual tasks that I'm working on and automate my life and make my life easier. But what are we looking at from a task and workflow perspective for the whole company? And especially when we're talking incident response, you're going to tap into a lot of different teams. You're going to tap into a lot of different folks across the organization. It's not just IT. It's not just security. If you understand your workflow, if you understand your business, and you know today the manual process is these 12 steps, then it becomes much, much easier and have a lot more confidence when you automate those steps. You know what to expect. You know what the outcomes are supposed to be. You're going to see red flags much sooner. And the whole process becomes much less scary because you know, even before you start to crawl, what it's going to look like when eventually you run. And that's a key part of it's not a silver bullet. You've got to do that hard work up front before you start really jumping into the automation piece and plugging it all in and letting it run.
Good point. And Chris, do you want to do you want to go even further in how do we incorporate AI within an organization to help out?
So I think there's multiple levels, right? At each point, whether you're talking about on the front end of the security side, where you're profiling your organization, this really helps to the point that Nathan was just making, right? We can implement some AI on the front end to help understand some processes and do what we call baselining. And baselining can extend way beyond just security baselining or profiling. It can really get us a sense for what's normal in the organization and what are some things that we can bring some automation to quickly. And we can certainly do that on the back end too, right? As Greg made some points earlier about how SIM kind of sits at the heart of what a lot of SOAR is, and the kind of analytics that we're bringing into the SIM role of SOAR right now helps with automation a great deal because it can speed up a lot of human response to things, which is key to orchestration and automated response. We all know the problems with dwell time, and we all know how little time an attacker needs to actually, enact a compromise. So by using AI, right, with the analytics on the back end of all of that data coming from the person's identity, the machine's behavior, the network behavior analytics, all of those things, we can create reactions based on that, sometimes even predictively, right, to lock down some privileges or enact some controls before something bad happens. I think that's another key point about SOAR. It doesn't always just have to be reaction to things that we know are bad. We can take some predictive policy reactions to restrict some policies to help prevent some bad things from happening too. I think that's kind of like the next step in SOAR.
Thank you. And Greg, want to finish up this question for us?
Yeah, I just want to add one quick comment because, when we work with our customers, for them to just, sprinkle some artificial intelligence and machine learning on their IT stack is not very easy for them. They don't have the expertise. They don't have the know-how. They may not have enough relevant data to run artificial intelligence and machine learning on their data sets. But people like Checkpoint, BlackBerry, Tenable, and others, right? We have much larger technology ecosystems, right? We have 7 billion queries a day coming in the threat cloud from our 100,000 plus customers. And that gives us a tremendous amount of information to collect, to correlate, and then run this type of analysis on, and then provide tangible benefits back to the customers, right? So that the artificial intelligence and machine learning is maybe not running directly on their firewall manager or their endpoint manager, but we're receiving events and alerts from millions of endpoints and hundreds of thousands of devices. And that gives us a lot more information and data within our sets to work with, such that our artificial intelligence and machine learning can automate, one, back to our own technology, or two, then have interoperability with the various plugins, whether it's SIM, SOAR, EDR, endpoint, automation, orchestration, and many other technology stacks that exist within our customers and partners.
Thank you. Joe, we're going to send this question over to you to get us started on it. We're talking about all this really incredible talent that is needed to run these systems. Even when we do have AI, we still need a lot of talent. What are some best practices and recommendations that you can share to attract and retain talent?
Absolutely. And I think that's one of the kind of big important questions in the industry that we have and it's not just about making sure we have security expertise coming in. We also, as Nathan mentioned, we need also people coming from other industries. And one of the problems we have is that the negative perception in our industry, we need to change that first of all. We need to make security people want to come work in it. It's not something people look at and they get scared off. It's a very, let's say, sometimes unthankful job to be doing in many cases because you tend to be in the background working very hard and you only get visible when things go wrong. That's when basically things start to come. So for those 360 days a year when everything's working, it's kind of like you're in the background and not getting, the respect and the kind of, I guess, the praise that they should do. So ultimately it means that, yes, we have to understand that we have to attract more people from other parts of, whether it being data scientists, whether it being from even social background, from basically communications, from HR, from financial. We have to get more people from multiple aspects from the business to come into the organization, into technology. We have to get the business to also work together because security it's no longer a silo. It's a cross-functional part of the entire business operations. And that's what's really important. So how do we attract talent is we have to invest in the people that we have already in the organization. You have to invest in your existing staff because the best people that you're able to get coming into your organization is through your existing people. They're the ones that have networks and connections and communicate. And if they're referring other people to come work for the same company they work for, that's one of the best ways to be able to get staff. But it's also balance as well. Some places, organizations that might be in cities where the talent is already saturated and they have large retention and large rotation problems. For those companies, they have to be willing to also accept people working remotely. And I think that's one of the probably the benefits of the pandemic itself. It's forced organizations to go beyond traditional office pool of staff to now go into a larger pool of staff that are working across not just the country, but the world. So that's how you attract talent, is by investing in people and being more open to be able to allow people to work in their own environment where they can excel.
My entire company's always been remote, and we've done well. I've been a remote worker for 10 years, and I've been very, very productive in my opinion. Nathan, did you want to add to that about talent?
Yeah, I mean, I think we have two really important questions inside this one, right? Which is the how do you attract, and then separately, how do you retain? And you really have two different groups dealing with this. The attract part, first of all, I agree completely with what Joe just said. I mean, I think all of those things are incredibly important, and I don't say that quickly to just dismiss them, just want to be mindful of time. But I think it's important for hiring managers and HR groups, get back to this one fundamental truth. Information security as a discipline, it's not a technology function, it is a risk management function. When you lock yourself into cutting and pasting class specs from other companies, and you're like, oh, I need an entry-level, security engineer, I'll just take this, requires 10 years of experience and a master's degree and, all these other, like, no. You're looking at this all wrong. You're not looking for IT engineers here, you're looking for risk management professionals. And that can be a very broad array of people, a lot of skill sets, and you could teach the technology, right? I mean, that's the part we always kind of forget, is that you can teach the tools, but you can't teach the analytical mindset. You can't teach that risk-focused kind of behavior. And if you're looking to attract people and bring them in, widen the scope. It's time. Like, we're way past this point where we just have to get more IT engineers there. No offense to all the IT engineers. That's where some of us came up from, right?
Yeah.
So if you're looking to attract, that's one part. Now, if you're trying to retain, once you find these people, I think the cultural shift for organizations is maybe the most key part of it, in my opinion. We have, coming from the West Coast, Silicon Valley has defined the industry for the last chunk of years. And I think everyone's gone down the road of, who can outpay who as the retention strategy. If I give you more money, you'll stay, right? You hate your job, you're miserable, you are, as Joe's point, hated whenever you pop up, but hey, we'll just give you some more money and everything's fine. Culturally, we have to change that because our employees have changed what's important to them, right? Yeah. It's not anymore about the foosball tables in the break room and about the free lunches. Yeah, I'm really big on the big foos lobby, by the way. That's my thing. But it's not about these kinds of conversations anymore. People are asking for flexibility in their schedules. They're asking for better work environments. They're asking for, like here at Tenable, we get days off to vote. We get time off to volunteer. That's huge. The concept. And they understand that these are the things that you get.
Work-life balance. People, we've got, especially the younger, I'm noticing that our younger staff really believes in the work-life balance. People my age and older, we never had that. So, all right, we're gonna do a little bit of a lightning round here. I've got some quick questions, and each each question just has one person answering. So let's see if we can get through these. So we'll start with Chris. How important is automatic response timing in a Soar solution? Oh, I think you're on mute. It's got to happen once.
Apology. Yeah. Yep. So I would say, apart from making sure everything's functional, it's probably the most important part of it. Knowing what can be done in such a short amount of time by a determined attacker. If we are going to trust our security systems to Soar, to an automation, then we have to make sure that that automated response can take place quickly, right? The idea is that Soar can do it faster than a human being could react, so we have to make sure that's true. It isn't always necessarily true if the integration is broken or if the analytics are taking longer than we think they should.
Thank you. This one's to Torsten. How does Soar fit into the governance, risk, and compliance space?
Well, I think Nathan summarized it best. Information security is risk management. And risk management, you have to understand what the business impact is. And so bringing in the data that you get from, Soar and populating it up the chain, if you will, into the risk management realm and the business impact really ties it all together.
Thank you so much. Isaac, in working across different customers and environments, where do you see the greatest benefit in automation? And do you have an example?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's enabling, security organizations, risk organizations to make more comprehensive decisions. So as we look at, ultimately your capability of what you're able to evaluate and how you're able to do that, the goal there is you're now actually providing that pathway for what your decision-making process is, instead of relying from an automation standpoint on what you're going to do.
Good point. Okay, Greg, how does migration to cloud impact security, operation, automation, and response?
Yeah, it's crazy because I'm going to say in one way it makes it easier, right? Amazon, Azure, Google, right? They have a common API tooling within the network, the computing, the storage, the serverful, and serverless. Think about it on-premise, where Soar has to integrate to your Cisco network, your VMware environment, your EMC storage, your software applications. Each have their own API connections and capabilities and limitations. But cloud is natively intrinsically built from an API-centric model first, which I think makes it a more natural plug-in to technologies like Soar.
Thank you so much. Nathan, how about this one? What are some of the ways you can better prioritize what threats are addressed automatically versus the ones that need hands-on attention?
I think there's really two keys here when you're trying to prioritize threats and ultimately prioritize what you respond to. One is really focus on good threat intelligence. You've got to have a better handle on what's happening with vulnerabilities in real time, not just relying on CVSS as an example in the vulnerability space. Are there exploit kits happening out there? Are attackers taking advantage of these vulnerabilities? Is there attention being paid to it? Is it a real threat today? Or is it something that isn't a threat? Having that kind of dynamic understanding of the real threat intelligence is like one half of the puzzle. The other half goes back to preparedness. And when I say that, I mean understanding your environment and what's important to you. If you understand what assets are really critical, if you understand that the CFO's laptop is much bigger of a target than some test system in my lab, you can prioritize threats much better because you know the devices and the assets, the databases, the application, whatever, that are really, really critical to your business. And you can make sure that as you're looking at these really damaging threats coming in, you're pairing that up with the right critical assets. That's where you focus. That's how you prioritize. That's where you're going to get your big risk mitigation quickly and more efficiently.
Thank you. Joe, how does SOAR work with privilege access management?
Absolutely. One of the things that we love and we hate is passwords. Passwords open doors, but they also are one of the biggest pains that we have. And what basically working with SOAR and privilege access management takes that pain away. One of the things that we have the ability to do is take away the pain of having to remember and change passwords, especially when something like Cylance flags a piece of malware in a system, or Tenable finds a vulnerability, that all of that can work together. We can find those systems and rotate the passwords, taking away that pain. So I think that's one of the biggest things is people want to take the pain away from passwords and they want to reduce cyber fatigue. And SOAR with privilege access management achieves that.
Thank you. Chris, how does security prevention strategy impact an organization's SOAR solutions?
Well, two important ways, right? One, the more you can prevent, the less taxed your response capabilities, all of the infrastructure involved in response are going to be. There's less noise to separate a signal from. So that's the important part, right? One, but also as we take our responsive actions from an automated response, let's also remember, as we spoke earlier, some of those responses can be to help prevent further attacks or further exploitation from an existing attack. So prevention should be part of an overall response strategy from beginning to end.
Great point. Torsten, how do you translate SOAR events and activities into meaningful insight and intelligence for the management and the board?
So it's really understanding what the board and what management wants to see, wants to hear. It's generally computed in dollars and cents rather than numbers of hey, we had this many vulnerabilities and we saw this many viruses. So it's really taking that data that comes out of SOAR and encapsulating it and providing financial impact, good or bad, to the management, to the board, and being able to quantify those numbers in a way that's meaningful for those end users.
Thank you. Nathan, how much should non-IT business units within an organization be involved in the SOAR implementation?
Heavily, I guess, is the simple answer. We've already kind of covered this a little bit, but again, understanding your processes, understanding what's going on in your business requires you to get other units involved in the organization, and that's just key to fundamental understanding of what's going on. I think a key point, though, to also keep in mind is that you need those people and those teams involved after the implementation is done and through the end parts of it, especially if you're focusing on response. And if we're thinking about incident response, especially, it's not really solely about the automation. It's also about what does the business do to respond to the automation? Like when the events are happening, do you have your communications team involved to respond to public events? Do you have your sales team aware that things are happening? They can help customers. Your tech support group knows that something's happened automatically and that they need to be prepared for inbound calls. All that automation can be fantastic in an incident response standpoint, but if the other business units that are not technical aren't involved, you're going to have a lot of problems when some of those triggers start to happen. So it's critical to have everybody involved every step of the way.
Thank you. Joe, how can SOAR help the business side of things be more successful?
Absolutely. And it's going kind of pivoting a little bit off of what Nathan was just mentioning, is that the customer of SOAR is not IT and the security team. The customer of SOAR is the business. And that's ultimately, we have to make sure we keep that in the forefront of our mind, is that it has to be business focused. It has to be, how does it actually enable the business? How does it take pain away from employees gaining access to systems? How does it allow the business to reduce wasted time of employees performing tasks? How does it help actually allow people to spend more time and learning to new technologies than actually having to maintain and just keep the lights on for old technologies? How does it help make sure that the organization can roll out new innovative solutions? SOAR's customer is the business, not IT. And that's where the value comes from, is that how can I actually make sure that it actually provides an ROI to the business? Because ultimately at the end, when you're talking to the board, you're talking to the business, ultimately you have to provide basically a value. And that's why the customer SOAR is the business itself.
Good point. All right, so to wrap this up, I'm going to call on each person and ask them to give their, one piece of advice you want to leave for someone in the audience about the SOAR discussion that we've just had, something you'd like to have them stick out. Greg, would you start for us?
Yeah, I think it builds upon what we were just talking about, which is understanding the business and the technical risk, right? And where do we want to focus our efforts? Because there's many different areas of technology integration in a project like SOAR, but you have to start somewhere, right? And it has to align balancing that technical and the business risk to understand where do we focus our priorities and our efforts.
Thank you. Chris?
Here's a practical and tactical one for you. Make sure you have a Python person on your security team.
Okay, that's simple and easy. There you go. Isaac?
I think the biggest one is know your opportunity for automation, right? If you're going to get the most out of it, make sure that you're not just presuming that you can move into that, but really identifying that opportunity. And that's going to help you build into that whole business approach.
Thank you. Torsten?
Yeah, I think don't be afraid. Don't be afraid to get your hands dirty. Don't be afraid to try and tackle some of those new challenges, learn those new languages. They're going to pay off dividends in the end. So just be adventurous.
And rely on your vendor partners to help you walk through. I mean, that's really how a lot of it gets done. Nathan?
I think, yes, all of the above. And, be prepared to think outside the box a little bit. I think we get caught into the marketing schemes there. My marketing team's going to kill me for saying that. There's no silver bullet or panacea here. It's a lot of hard work. You need your people. And you need new people involved. So think creatively. This is a great opportunity to not just automate the old, but to really define the new, and use that time to do it.
Thank you, Joe.
Absolutely. It's all about focusing on solving problems. That's ultimately what we're here to do, is solve problems, making sure that we do it in an efficient, effective manner, and ultimately asking the right questions as well. Know what questions you want the answers to beforehand. Don't just basically come and expect it to give the answers without having really thought thoroughly on the questions that you want. And this ultimately comes down to, so make sure you know the questions you want to ask, and always focus on solving problems. Don't let the technology become the problem.
Exactly.
That's where the problems start to go wrong. So focus on the business and focus on solving business problems, not technology problems.
Well, I really appreciate learning so much today from this panel. And I know there's going to be people in the audience that want to talk to you more. So I want to encourage everyone to go to your booth. So you can also go to the Cybercrime Support Network booth, and we'll have teams there and continue these conversations. Thank you to the Cybersecurity Summit and to all of you for a fantastic conversation. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.